Welcome to the Magical Traveling Moms podcast, where your hosts, Tina and Colleen, talk about all things travel. From theme parks to cruises to all-inclusive resorts and more, they cover news, tricks, and insider tips to inspire your travel dreams. They love to travel and want you to love it too. Find out their best-kept secrets and learn how to make your next vacation extra magical right here on the Magical Traveling Moms podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Magical Traveling Moms podcast. My name is Colleen and I am joined today with my fabulous co-host Tina, and we are going to be discussing all of the latest news involving traveling during a pandemic and with COVID. As you know, these things are changing pretty much weekly, so we are here with all of the latest updates on what you need to know if you are planning on traveling in the next few months. But before we get started, I want to take a moment to mention the fabulous sponsors of our podcast, Mystical Dream Travel. Mystical Dream Travel is an earmarked travel agency and an authorized Disney vacation planner. Now more than ever, we recommend using a travel agent because they will have the most up-to-date information about all of the restrictions, policies, etc. They're going to be able to help you make the best decisions for planning a vacation during this time. And you don't want to go it alone, okay? Use a professional and save yourself a lot of time, stress, and worry. So head over to their website, mysticaldreamtravel.com, or look them up on social media. So, hey, Tina, how are you today?
Oh, I'm fabulous, Colleen. How are you?
I am doing well. So today our topic, it's kind of a controversial hot button topic. And of course, it's what everybody is asking questions about and wants to know about. And it's an ever-changing situation. Notice how I eliminated the word fluid and what was the unprecedented? Yeah. they've been overused the last year, I think. So
yes.
But it is a constantly evolving situation, and different policies are coming out literally weekly, sometimes daily. Things are changing. So it's hard to kind of keep track of everything. Of course, given our jobs and the industry we're in, that's part of our job, is to know what's going on. So we thought we should hop on and kind of do an episode just letting everybody know what are the current, like as of right now,
as of September 14th.
As of September 14th. So, and this will air on September 16th. And,
yes.
Who knows? Something could change between now and then. But as of September 14th, 2021, these are the current policies for traveling to different areas. So it's a lot to keep track of.
It definitely is. And I think it's really important now more than ever to use a travel advisor because they know, they look this up every day and it changes constantly. And we, like Colleen and I both know the changes and what they mean for our clients and for everybody out there. So it's really important. They know the research and know the details. So
well, and if you're just going on Google, and just Googling, what are the travel restrictions to Jamaica? You might find articles that are a few months old or a year old, or, and that information might not be accurate. So if you really want definitely for sure the most up-to-date information, a travel advisor is going to have that, and you can feel confident that they're going to give you the correct information. And how many times over the last year has a client reached out to one of us and said, oh my gosh, my friend says,
yes.
Or I saw on a Facebook group, or
yes. So
9 times out of 10, whatever information it was not accurate. It was not the up-to-date information. So you want to know. Really, it's important because there are some countries where you can't go if you don't have the right information, the right things in place. So it's important. But I thought we would kick off by starting with domestic travel, because there are still, certain restrictions for some domestic travel. It depends on where you want to go. But, a lot of places are still, making you wear masks indoors. like
Yes.
Walt Disney World. But then there are other places that aren't making you wear a mask, or enforcing masks, like Universal Studios in Florida. They have signs saying, it's recommended, but they're not really enforcing it like Disney is. So that can make a really big difference if someone wants to go on vacation, because there are some people who are going to feel more comfortable going to Disney because they have the masks, or there are some people who might prefer to go to Universal because they know they won't have to wear the mask. So again, this is why it's so important to use a travel advisor.
No, I agree. So, it gets confusing because we were at Disney in June and they had implemented, they still had like mask indoors and in the queues. So when you entered into the queue, then we left a couple days later and they took all that away.
Right.
So
completely away.
All of it was gone. And then a few weeks later, they brought it back. So
right.
the mask.
But different. And then they changed it even like a few days after that.
Yes.
Because first it was masks again in the queues and indoors. And then a few days later, they revised it so that you don't have to wear it in an outdoor queue.
Yes, but an indoor queue.
But indoor queues,
it has to be more.
Yes. Again, it's changing all of the time. And so it is important to know exactly what to prepare for before you're going to go someplace. And this is something that a lot of people are considering greatly when they're choosing a place to go on vacation. You want to go on vacation, but you might have strong opinions or feelings about one thing or the other. So that's why it's important to know, because you don't want to get somewhere and then be upset because it isn't what you expected it was going to be.
Right, I agree. So you really need to understand, no matter where you're traveling, whether it's in the U.S. or internationally, what those requirements are, and be okay with that. You, like Colleen said, like you said, you don't want to get there and be surprised and be like, well, I didn't know I had to wear a mask the whole time, or part of the time, or on the ride, or not on the ride. So it definitely changes, and each destination or brand has their own policies and procedures. So it's not like a one size fits all that Walt Disney World has the same thing as Universal. It's definitely two different brands, two totally different products, and two totally different ways that they are currently managing the mask requirements and the COVID and all of that. One thing for sure that has stopped, at least, at Walt Disney World and Universal, are the temperature checks. Those have been gone, and they haven't brought those back. So those have been gone for quite a while. And so it definitely, it's important to really think about, where you're heading to domestically and what those requirements are, because they are different. And I suspect, as we see things are starting to go back up and number wise, that they may change again.
Well, that's it exactly, is you never know when they might decide. Maybe Universal will decide to bring masks back, or, you just don't know. So that's why it's so important. And what's great about when you are using a travel advisor is when something changes, they're going to immediately tell you. So you'll know right away, and then you can decide, do I want to change my dates? Do I want to, cancel? Do I, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'll guide you in what your options are and whatnot. I did want to mention, so I wanted to talk about Hawaii. So Hawaii isn't continental U.S., but, it is a state. But Hawaii is definitely a little bit of a different situation than a lot of the other states, where they are being a little bit more strict about who they are allowing.
And they recently just came out with changes.
Like
in the last couple of weeks.
It literally went into effect yesterday.
Yes.
And right now it's only for the island of Oahu, but that's where Honolulu is, and that is where the majority of tourists do go, is on Oahu, which is why I think that island in particular decided to come out with this policy. But they and it's strict. They are not allowing you to go indoors, basically into a restaurant or a museum or any kind of indoor business unless you present a vaccine card showing that you are fully vaccinated or a negative COVID test result that was taken within the last 48 hours. So you have to think, if you are an unvaccinated tourist, that's going to be kind of annoying, because you're going to have to be taking a COVID test every 48 hours.
Yes, in order to go.
Yeah, so that is a huge consideration, I think, for anybody thinking of traveling to Hawaii. And they don't have an end date really for that. And the other islands are all considering something similar. Mm-hmm. So you never know. But yeah, those are the kinds of things you have to think of when you are wanting to plan a vacation. That's stuff you're going to have to, bring into consideration if that's going to work for your family or not.
Yeah, depending on the destination of where you're going to go, and I see you have this coming up next, but I do wonder if other states or domestic destinations like Walt Disney World and Universal are eventually going to require a vaccination passport or card.
I would say that is probably one of the number one questions I get.
Yes, I just got it yesterday.
Is, do you think this place, wherever it is they want to go, will require vaccinations? And it's like, we don't know. We don't. I'll be honest with you. In the beginning, I absolutely did not think that would be the case. I was like, I'll be surprised if countries, especially like the Caribbean islands or businesses like Disney, would require you to show a vaccine card. Like, to me, I was like, I just don't know if that's, because it's so controversial, if that will really happen, because obviously they want people to come and it's a business, they're making money. So they want people to go. But now, as time has gone on and things have evolved, I don't know. Now I'm like, well, maybe it's more plausible than I originally thought.
Yeah, I just had this question yesterday from a client asking me if they thought Walt Disney World was going to require the vaccination in order to come. And I'm like you. I think if you'd asked me a year ago or even 6 months ago, even 3 months ago, I'd have been like, I would be incredibly surprised if that became a requirement. But as we're seeing more and more move in that direction, it's possible, you know what I mean? I think it's
right.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in that position to have to make that decision.
No, I think we can all agree on that. I would not want to be the people making these decisions, because it really is kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. So
yes,
I would not want to be the person deciding. But I know in Florida, the governor of Florida, they passed a law, I guess, saying vaccine passports were not going to be legal. Like they're
not allowed to ask.
Right.
Yeah.
Like businesses were not going to be able to require a vaccine card in order to enter. So Florida has done that, which greatly affected the cruises, which we're going to talk about next. But because they were going to do fully vaccinated, but they got around it. So with the cruise lines, they are sailing at mostly vaccinated. They're allowing a small percentage of unvaccinated guests. So is that something Walt Disney World could do eventually? Like, to get around that rule, say, okay, well, we're not going to require it, but if you want to come and you're unvaccinated, there's a very limited number of spots, and it's a lottery, and you have to enter to see if you get a spot, kind of thing. Yeah. I don't know. That's what the cruise lines are doing. So
yeah, I don't know if they would move to something like that. I don't know. I think it's
still would be surprised, but now I don't know. Of course, after the last year and a half, I'm like, does anything surprise me anymore? I don't know.
Exactly. I don't even know. Like I said, I would not want to be the decision maker at any of the parks, whether it's Universal or Disney destination stuff, just because that's a tough position. You have the state of Florida where you're not allowed to ask, and I think that that's, an issue, but they're also a private business. And so they have the right to do what they want to do.
That's what I wonder too. Like if there's so much controversy and gray area, and who knows what will happen. But I do know the two things that I keep telling people is use a travel advisor. Absolutely. Especially a travel agency like Mystical Dream Travel doesn't charge a fee. So it doesn't cost you anything extra to use a travel agent, but you're going to get so much better information and up-to-date and accurate intel, but also travel insurance. Please just get the travel insurance, because you don't know what will happen. And that uncertainty, so you might say, I'm going to go to Hawaii no matter what. I had a client say that to me. I don't need the travel insurance. It doesn't matter what happens. I'm going to go to Hawaii no matter what. And you know what? They messaged me a couple of weeks ago and said, oh, hey, we don't know if we want to go now because of these changes. So again, you don't know what will happen. Don't assume that you do, because a lot of things that are happening right now, we never would have guessed would have happened.
No. And in life in general, stuff happens. I have 2 situations going on with clients right now. I can't really share, but it's not even related to this at all, to the COVID situation and stuff like that. So travel insurance is a whole nother topic and things, but I do, stuff happens, life happens. And I always say it's like car insurance. It's there if you need it. So
exactly. Hopefully you don't, but in case you do,
absolutely.
You're not stuck.
Yeah. But I think, like you said, it's important now more than ever to use a travel advisor. One, because you want to ensure you're getting the most accurate and current information, and that's the key. You want to make sure you're working with somebody who knows what they're doing and has been in the middle of it, since the beginning of all this starting, and has a lot of experience and knowledge. And that's something, our sponsors, Mystical Dream Travel, has. So you want to make sure you reach out to them. But, back to just the discussion on what these companies are going to do. And I want to just say, in the meantime, it is very possible and very safe to travel. We've had tons of clients travel all year. I personally have traveled since last July, multiple times, and you have been as well traveling. And so it definitely is safe to travel, but you need to be aware of the requirements and just do it safely. And I would recommend that anyway, even without all of this,
So no, it's absolutely possible, but it's finding the destination and situation that works best for your family and getting all that information, like you said. So, but so cruises were the next topic, which if there's been anything that has changed so much in the last year, I would say cruises are it. It's very overwhelming, like how many changes have happened for the cruise industry.
And still happening.
Continuing. Yeah, exactly. Like it's really, talk about a fluid situation. Yeah, but they are mostly, the major cruise lines, that we work with, they are all doing mostly vaccinated cruises. And they are definitely making policies and procedures, and I don't blame them necessarily, and some of it's dictated by the ports, but they are definitely making it so it is in your best interest, it is advantageous to you to be vaccinated. And if you are not vaccinated, it's not going to be the same experience.
So if you are a cruise lover, and that's a vacation that you really want to take, especially in the next, I'll say 6 months or so, to make it easy for you and your family, that vaccination is a personal choice. And you have to do what's right for your family. What might be right for one may not be right for another. And so, but if cruise is on your list, to make it, it's not that you can't not go unvaccinated, but it definitely is a lot easier for you to be able to do the cruises and do all the things that you want to do on a cruise vacation.
Right.
If I'm not saying not to go, but we get asked this all the time. Is it the time for me to cruise now, or should I wait? And, my thoughts on that are that it really is a personal choice based on what you want to do for, you and your family. But I will say that it's definitely, we're seeing more and more of the cruise lines going towards being vaccinated to be able to get on a cruise without any issues or concerns. But it changes. Of course, children 12 and under, or 11 and under, are not required to be vaccinated, but there are testing requirements that you have to do. And each cruise line has their own way of doing it. So, Disney, they have that they're using this safe passage that your clients have to go through the process. And if you do not do it, and you're you don't upload the proper documents and either the testing or your vaccination card and all of that stuff, and it doesn't turn green, but you still show up at the port, they will deny you boarding. You're not going.
You're done. There's no exceptions. And you again, use a travel advisor.
Yes, because they will tell you all of this, things that you need to be doing. And there have been people who have showed up at Port Canaveral, and it must be done 24 hours prior to even getting on the cruise.
Like, oh no, I didn't do it, and then do it there. Like, no.
Yeah, you can't stand there on your phone and do it while you're waiting in line. It doesn't work that way.
No, they're being very strict about it. And most of the cruise lines have something like that, where you have to upload a test result. And even the vaccinated cruisers have to do a COVID test, even though you have your vaccination card. But then if you're unvaccinated, I think most of them are doing this, where you have to test again during the cruise. 3 days into the cruise, if you are unvaccinated, you have to do another test. And a lot of these, I don't know if Disney is charging people, but I know the other cruise lines are
yes. So under the age of, at least for Disney, under the age of 11, there's no charge for the testing.
Okay.
But older, and as of a couple days ago, so
I know, right? But
older.
Carnival definitely was, and it's like $150 a person.
Yeah, it's not cheap. It's definitely not cheap.
You are on the hook for that, and it is. So there's these limited spots that you can enter. It's kind of like a lottery to get exemptions. They do. I think most of them are doing preference for the kids.
Yes.
I know Carnival anyway was doing, if you were an adult, if you were over the age of 12 and unvaccinated, they weren't going to let you on unless you had a medical reason for being unvaccinated. You couldn't just say, I didn't want to get vaccinated. You had to actually present some type of a doctor's letter, something stating what your medical exemption from being vaccinated was, or you couldn't even apply for a spot.
Wow.
Yeah. So it and like you said, each cruise line is a little different on how they're handling it. So it's important to know exactly what the restrictions are and what the rules are before you decide to go with one or the other.
Yep, and they change, like Colleen and I have both said, especially with the cruise lines right now, because they're really just firing back up. Like they're really just getting back in the water.
Yeah.
And so they're still kind of working out details and changing things. And I suspect that things will change again. Like we just got an update the other day from Disney. So it's just like, it changes it does change quite a bit. So it's really important.
Especially like you said, they're just getting started again. So as they do more cruises, things will evolve and they'll have to make changes here or there or whatever to accommodate whatever situations come up. But I do know a lot of it is being driven by the islands in the Caribbean anyway. For these
that's the other thing. Some of them, I know initially, Disney started with, Nassau stops, and their traditional cruise 4-night is usually a stop at Nassau and then their private island. And they're not even doing, I mean, the last couple cruises were not, they were just going to Castaway Cay and that was it.
Right, because the Bahamas is actually being pretty strict about.
Yes, they are.
Allow off of the ship, and in a lot of these ports, you cannot get off of the ship unless you are part of a specific tour. They're called bubble tours or bubble excursions, where you don't come in contact with anyone else on the island except the people in your tour. Yeah. And they're doing that to protect their people and whatnot. But that, again, that's a huge consideration. If you like, I know our family, a lot of times we don't book an excursion and we just get off the ship and do our own thing or walk around or just check it out. And we would not be allowed to do that because both of my kids are under 12. So you can't do that right now.
Yeah, it's definitely not restricted. And someone asked me, why do these islands have so many restrictions? And so if you take a step back and really think about it, they're very small, and a lot of them only have one hospital. So if they have a major outbreak, they would really be overrun.
And there's nowhere to go. They're an island. It's not like a state in the United States where you could go to another state or something. It's and they're all different countries, really. Each island is its own country. So you can't just move people around. I understand why they're being as cautious as possible, because it would be very devastating to them if they had a huge outbreak. But
absolutely.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to consider.
It is a lot to consider.
But looking at cruises right now, but I agree. I think it will change a lot in the next few months. Going and things.
Yeah, and it will get, I think some things we will see ease up as they learn and as they see what's working and what's not working and kind of work things out. I mean, I hope this time next year all of this is gone. I think we all do.
I know, but I remember saying that last year, and so now I'm like hesitant to say it again. But if you look back in history at past pandemics, because it's not like this has never happened before. It typically runs its course in 2 to 3 years. So, so that gives me comfort that, okay, well, we're bound to get more herd immunity and whatever, as we go forward. So hopefully case numbers will go down. Hospitals will not be, overrun and full, and we can ease up on some of these restrictions. But for the time being, you just don't know.
Yeah, let's hope so. We'll see.
So speaking of the Caribbean, that was the next on my list to talk about, because obviously there's going on a cruise to the Caribbean, but the rules are actually a little different going on a cruise versus if you just went to the island.
Yes, that is true.
And stayed at a resort. So, which I think is interesting. I think that's very interesting that there's like slightly different rules if you're on a cruise ship versus if you just went to a resort there.
Yeah, and I think that was probably one of the cruise line's biggest complaint, because
I would complain because I'd be like, hey, what?
Yeah, they're getting they're still flying there, and you're still having all these people there, and they're still they're compacted into a resort. So, so I can kind of understand what they're
It's interesting.
Concerns
I
wise.
think it's
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But in the Caribbean, certain destinations, certain islands are requiring a negative COVID test
Yes.
in order to enter the country. And then some are not requiring any type of a COVID test, but they might be doing random testing. Like in Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic, you don't have to take a COVID test to go to the country, but they do random testing in the airport.
Yes.
So you might have to do that. You might have to take a test when you get there in the airport.
Yep. Yep.
So.
And in every country, like you said, is very different on what their requirements are. Some are easier to go to than others, but also you have to keep in mind when we come back, the United States requires a negative COVID test in order to get back. That is a U.S. requirement. So that's something that a lot of people ask us about. And it's really important to understand the difference that there are actually requirements in the United States when you leave the country that you have to get tested in order to come back in. And I do believe the cruise lines, you have to have a test when you come off that ship as well.
Oh, really?
I think so. I could be wrong. I have to look that up, but I could be wrong.
Back from other countries. That's the thought. You're coming to another country and now you're coming back. They want to test you before you can come in.
Yep. So, anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one of the biggest questions that, and honestly, one of the things I think a lot of people that I've talked to don't understand, and I can understand, and I get why they don't, is how does it work if you test positive? So that's like, obviously that's another number one question I get. Well, what if I test positive when I take that test to fly back to the United States?
Yes.
And there's some people who have said, well, I have to quarantine in Mexico for a month, and when can I come back, and do I need to take another test? So there's a lot of misconception about how exactly that works. So I thought that would be a good thing for us to explain to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer is this. The quick answer is that if you test positive in destination, you do have to quarantine.
Right.
And you do have to, the resorts have set aside, depending on the brand. I mean, they all have, but each brand has kind of different requirements on how long you quarantine. So, and it changes. So it changes.
Well, I thought it was the U.S. that dictated how many days you quarantine.
Well, it's interesting because we have two situations. And I'll explain in a minute, but you do have to quarantine, and they do have sections in their resort that they have reserved. That is
some resorts.
Yeah, some resorts.
Some resorts will send you somewhere else. Again, another reason to use a travel.
Another resort.
That's a big distinction between resorts. Some will let you stay at the resort. Some are going to send you somewhere else.
Yes, exactly. So that's another reason to kind of use, I know I keep saying it, but to use an advisor because they know the resorts and they can know the information. So an example, so if you're staying at, and this was several months ago, so it could be different today, but the AM Resorts or Dreams brand requires a 10-day quarantine. And then another brand, which was Hollywood, I believe, only required 5.
So that's interesting because I was thinking it was dictated by the U.S. how many days you quarantined because you don't test again. So that's one of the
things. Yes, you do not test again.
You do not have to. It's not like you have to stay wherever you are until you get a negative COVID test because you could, once you have COVID, you could test positive for several months.
Yeah.
So they don't do that. Like you don't have to test again. But the resort has to give you documentation. And I guess I was under the impression that the U.S. is the one saying how many days you have to quarantine before you're allowed to come back in. But it's the resort that gets to decide.
I think it's the country, actually.
The country.
I mean, there's some confusion around it because you can hear that's the U.S., then you hear it's the country, and then you hear it's the resort. And their requirements and, and what they're looking for. Now, depending on the resort that you stay at, your COVID test is free, to return back to the U.S.
I think most of them are.
Yeah, that is part of your booking price that's included.
Absolutely.
And they will set that up for you when you check in. So when you arrive and you check in, that will all be scheduled for you, to get your testing done.
Yeah.
It is free. However, if you want to take an additional test, because if your rapid came back positive, and sometimes we all heard about the false positives. You will have to pay for
a PCR.
Yes, test. And you can do that. I think it's around $125.
Yeah, it's not bad. I would think most people would, just to make absolute sure that they're positive. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so if that does come back positive, obviously, you can't leave. So you have to do the required quarantine. We definitely would recommend having really good communication with the resort, understanding what to expect if you did, have a positive test, and really understand what is going to happen. If you are lucky enough to be at a destination where you stay at the actual resort, you can still get, you'll get your meals. You typically order off the menu,
the room service,
and then usually for dinner they'll let you order from the restaurants. And then you definitely want to keep that open communication with the resort, and they check on you. They make sure you're good and healthy and everything's going the way that that it should be. So it's really important to understand that what the requirements are going into each country. But it's also important to know that coming back to the U.S., you are going to have a negative COVID test. Now, here's one tip. If you've had COVID in the last 90 days, you actually can have your doctor give you a travel letter. So a recovery letter.
You had it and you recovered, right?
Yeah,
because again, you can test positive for 3 months, I think is what they said.
Yes.
3 months after you've had it. So you don't want to have that positive, but it's just because you've recovered from it, kind of thing.
Yeah, so there is a letter that you can get from your doctor that you can show the airlines. And then you wouldn't have to get tested. And definitely just let them know I have a recovery letter to travel. And you just show that, and you show that to the airlines, going to and from destination. So there are, some things that you can do, but they're definitely pretty strict on, if you are positive, there's no exception. I'm sorry, and, you have to follow the guidelines and, the rules that are in place. So they're meant to protect you and the staff and the,
absolutely. Yeah.
Everybody out.
And that's another, some countries are providing a free insurance, like additional insurance to tourists. To cover like medical expenses or quarantining expenses in a case where maybe the resort doesn't cover it. But then, I also would recommend you have some type of insurance for anything that could happen like that.
Yeah, and some countries are requiring that you have it.
Yes.
And not only that you have that, but you purchase an additional insurance from them.
Right.
So
that they're providing, and and they're pretty reasonably priced, but they
I think it'd be like $35.
Yeah, exactly. Like if something happens when you are in their country, that you're covered. Like it's not gonna be a bad situation where you can't afford it or it's expensive or who's paying for it, kind of thing. So
right, exactly.
But it's each destination is doing things a little differently. So it's important to know, again, like, can we say it again for the people in the back? Use a travel advisor.
Yes.
Because they will, and they can help you. Like if someone tests positive, if we have clients that happen, which thankfully I've been fortunate enough to not have anybody. But that's our job, is to help you and make sure that what's going on. Like you were saying, be in contact and communication with the resort. Like your travel advisor can help you with that. It will help you with that. And that's huge, like huge, especially when you're in another country.
Right.
So it's
Yep, absolutely.
So Europe is similar. So Europe is very similar to the Caribbean, where they are requiring, and all of these other countries have these. I think pretty much all of them. I haven't run into one that doesn't. There's an online form, like a health questionnaire.
Yes.
That you have to fill out. And you can't fill it out. Like usually there's a rule, like you can't do it sooner than 72 hours before you're going to be there. They really want you to fill it out the day you're coming. And you fill out this health questionnaire where you're basically saying, I don't have any symptoms. And then it gives you a QR code and you have to show that.
Right.
When you get there and they scan it. And then most of the countries are also doing, you fill out another health form coming home.
Yes.
So you have to do it again. Like in the airport, they're not doing a lot of paper stuff anymore. So I've noticed that a lot of these airlines and destinations are eliminating paper forms, and it's a QR code that you scan and you do it online. But you have to show that, like to get through security or to get on the airplane, that you fill that health questionnaire out. So that's another important thing to do.
Yeah, it's really important. And I'm actually thankful that a lot of them are going to digital because it does make it easier. You can do that right on your phone. Yeah. And a lot of them, like you have to have a QR code. You can and I always recommend saving it and screenshotting it, emailing it to yourself.
Yeah.
And also save it on your photos.
Going there, I always print it out. You're coming
that
back.
Too.
A lot of times you do it in the airport, so it's not like you're going to print it out. But going there, I always print it out in addition to having it saved on my phone, just in case something happens, your phone dies or whatever. Yeah. Anything
it makes
you can
it faster for you.
Yeah, exactly right. But to go over to most of any of the European countries that are in the European Union, it's the same deal where they have a special e-passport, COVID passport thing where you have to upload a negative COVID test and fill out a form, and you get a QR code, and that's what you have to do in order to go there. So, I mean, that's going to be I have a feeling that'll be in place for a while.
Over in Europe, yeah, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. When people would ask me or still ask me, do you think that they'll require vaccinations and whatnot? I've always, my opinion has always been, if there were going to be countries that required a vaccination, I would guess it would be some of the European countries. I could see them having something in place at some point where you needed to show a vaccination.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. It's a lot to keep track of, and so it's important to know, before you're planning travel, especially and what's hard is that people will plan trips far in advance. It's not like you're planning a European vacation for next month or Hawaii vacation next month. A lot of times people are doing stuff several months in advance. But that's, again, why I would recommend travel insurance, because right now, maybe it seems like, oh, it's no big deal, but in 6 months, you don't know what will have changed.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that travel right now, everything we've talked about sounds complicated. It doesn't have to be. And that's where using a travel advisor really pays off for you, because some things, depending on where their specialty lies, they can rattle off in a matter of seconds. This is what you need for here, here, and here, and you want to make sure that you're using somebody who really knows what they're talking about. So it's really important. So make sure you contact those agents over at Mystical Dream Travel, because they really do know. They have had multiple clients travel since the start of the pandemic, and they understand everything that needs to be done. And and whatnot, and the ins and outs of all of the things.
Well, and they have the resources, that's a big thing is, because there is a lot of misinformation out there. There, just because you read an article or a blog post or you saw something in a Facebook group, it does not necessarily mean that is accurate information. So you want to make sure the resource that you are using for this information is a valid one that really knows what they're talking about, because there is a lot of rumors and assumptions and all kinds of stuff I see out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Every day, we see it every day. The information is just, and it's it can be overwhelming. So you just want to make sure that you're using somebody who knows.
Exactly. Yeah. And like Tina said, it sounds complicated and it sounds overwhelming, but you can safely travel. There are absolutely destinations and options, no matter what your family is comfortable with, that would work. So it's just talking to your travel advisor, telling them what your concerns are and what your needs are, and they can point you in the right direction. But it is, we got to get out there and continue to travel and live our lives and in a safe way. But it is possible to go out and be safe and still enjoy vacations in other places. Absolutely,
and we're living proof of that. We've done it multiple times,
many places since last year. So it is possible, but we hope that this information was helpful to you guys, and it was informative. If you have other questions, again, if you have questions about certain destinations, we highly recommend you reach out to Mystical Dream Travel, and they can hook you up with an agent, a travel advisor that can, give you all of those detailed information. Or, obviously you can also feel free to leave a comment on our Facebook posts or Instagram and reach out to us too. And we're always happy to help, because we want to see you guys out there and travel, right?
Absolutely. And positive and kind comments, please.
yes, positive. We're trying to keep things positive here.
Yes.
But until next time, we hope all of your travels are magical.